Okay, thanks everyone. So I'll start by just apologising. I've been ill for the last few days, so I've not prepared anywhere near the structure to any of this. But hopefully what I want to do, I mean, I know you're all ingrained in the detail around employability and what we're doing around going left behind, but maybe talk a wee bit about the vision and where we're going and how it sits with a bit of what we've just heard. So clearly, around the child poverty strategy, those three key drivers, and income from employment is a big part of that. So, clearly a first step for a lot of people is getting them into jobs. As Jim said, that is, we know that's not, the be all and end all, just getting someone into work doesn't address these issues, but for a lot of people, it's a really important first step in making that journey. And that's why what we do in employability is obviously so closely integrated within the Scottish Government in terms of what we're doing around fair working skills as well, and making those links. Now, what we've been trying to do, obviously, I mean, particularly in the last few years since the we had increased powers devolved in this area, we've established Fair Start Scotland. We're trying to take forward these things in a different way, and focusing more on things like well-being, on how people have been treated in programmes, all these things that we learned through our consultation, way back 2015 when we first started looking at all of this, and we're starting to see that playing through. But there's still a lot more we can do, and there's a lot of space for a lot more innovation and doing things differently. So I think most of you will be aware. I mean, across the team, we've really got three main focuses around employability. There's the delivery of the programmes and the services we've got. There's the work to tackle the disability employment gap, which is obviously really critical and critical for a lot of the groups we're trying to do. It's a big focus of what's happening in poverty work in general, but particularly again around the child poverty work. And then there's the reforms of No One Left Behind, and really what No One Left Behind is all about is bringing that flexibility into the system that will let us start to address some of these issues and some of the points that Jim and Paul have been making. So we absolutely recognise these issues of the siloed nature of bits of the system, the difficulties individuals have had in navigating that and being able to access the right support at the right time. And part of that, we understand a lot of that and how it is where it is. But is through No One Left Behind, through the review of the employability services in the back of that last year, what you've said as government is is the Scottish Government will take the first step around that by looking to align the programmes we've got, bring them into a single funding pot, and then look at more innovative ways of doing it. And I think that's as we get into discussions later on today, parental employment support's an important big part of that, because this is not just about that relationship between what we're doing and that wider child poverty agenda, but it's also about how we challenge that status quo, about how we operate in the employability system and how we do this in a different way. So that's why really thinking like around key worker support, that longer term more consistent support again that Jim was talking about. That's these kind of things are at the heart of what we can do with the parental employability support, and it's then about how we build that more generally into the system. And No One Left Behind really is about a vision for a different approach to this. It's about how do we bring that collective leadership into this space. So I think because of the responsibilities, particularly across different layers of government, local government, Scottish government, UK government, through DWP, all trying to do, everyone trying to do the right thing, to do the best thing, but not talking to each other necessarily as much as we could about how we line that up, which leads to the cluttered landscape and that difficulty for individuals. So how do we take a more user-led approach to this? How do we start to embed this more so that we, so services and poverty living is built around the needs of individuals with more flexibility and adaptability. Now we've also got that's what's taken us to the joint partnership working agreement. How we link up more at local levels. That integration of services obviously has to be done locally with individuals. So the radical help book that again Jim talked about, something we've looked at as well. How you join up services more around individuals and what they need rather than trying to support them to navigate a difficult, complex landscape. How do we get better evidence in what's working well, and not just in terms of early job outcomes, but what is actually supporting that long-term sustainability and support. That's where the work around the shared measurement framework is going to come as well. How do we get a shared view of that? We can look at individual programmes at the moment, and some will look successful in terms of how many people are getting through initially, some won't, but actually what is having the long-term impact, what is having the greatest impact on people in the longer term, not just getting them into the jobs, but helping them sustain, and then hopefully giving that base where they can advance and progress. And again, how do we, again, one of the things we've heard a lot from people as we've been doing the various consultations in this is around how are you able to inject that creativity and innovation, different ways of doing things. The point you've got very structured, very tightly managed programs, then it can be difficult to do that at times. So again, by giving more flexibility, by joining up, the money more effectively, I think hopefully we can create more space for that. And working with providers and public, private, and the third sectors to try and get to get them doing what they're good at, and take their energy away from so much competition for bits of business, but actually get them engaging and supporting people and working together around that long-term journey. And I mean, we've obviously looked at different bits of this, and I think it'll be a part of the service design work we're going to be doing next year. But how does this sort of journey work, and particularly that bit about the promote fairer working lives? How do you get that clearer journey that's joined up and shared across all the players in this landscape in Scotland, that show how you get people who are not in work making that journey into sustainable work, so they can then be in that position to upskill and move forward. And really, again, in terms of doing something different, I think we are to support all of this as well. Like I say, the policy terms, through No One Left Behind, I think we showed what we're trying to do with the funding, but also what we're trying to do internally to support some of that. So as a team, as a government policy area, we're trying to get away from just managing programmes to actually help and facilitate and make some of these links. So, for example, I know one of the big agendas around it just now is around community wealth building, but rather than looking at our employability programmes in isolation, how does what we're doing around employability and supporting people into work, whether it's around how we commission things or how we support people into work, how is it linking into these wider procurement and commission agendas? How is it sitting better at a local level? How does it sit with the more regional or localised economic approaches that are coming? Because it's not just about turning people into jobs that aren't going to be there in 6 months or a year's time, but how are we actually linking those pathways for people into work into stronger local economies with more sustainable jobs that will be keeping the wealth in local areas. And I think what we're looking to do more is make sure that employability has been looked at more in these type of agendas than, like I say, the more traditional models. Obviously, the last thing around that we all have to do, whether it's a local government level or a Scottish government level, we need to have the right accountabilities around all of that. We need to make sure that we're knowing where the money's going and we get the most effective outcomes. But I think we can do that in a way that's different, looks different, and feels different. And absolutely the critical bit to doing all that is coming back to that collective leadership point. And obviously we signed the joint partnership working agreement last year. I think there's been a whole lot of work done, and we've been working really closely, I think, with the alignment group and with others about developing the first phase of transferring what we did was 50 agreements in SERI. Then we've been working really closely around parent employment support as well. But next year that really needs to step up a gear as we look, because if we're going to transfer employability fund to Community Jobs Scotland, and as we think about the future of Fair Start Scotland, there's I think there's a lot of opportunity and a real chance around this alignment to get this. And this is obviously we'll all recognise that there's financial pressures across the board. You all working areas, you'll all be going through this at the moment, I'm sure, of those internal discussions within your authorities about budgets for next year. We're doing the same nationally, but it's about how within all that, how do we continue to make the case for what we're doing in employability, make that that strong link to what's happening in these other agendas. Because if we're going to deliver inclusive growth, this is critical. You're making that first step and getting people in and thinking this in a different way is critical. And like I say, I think the fact that the relationships are so much closer now puts us in a really good position for next year as we go to develop and try and sort of address some of this. So that's really it for me. So I'm sure you'll pick up all these themes in the group discussions again later on. So thanks.